Hey, we're back. Look at you.
Yay, it's us.
So how are the pups today? How's Murphy and Henry?
Oh, they're crazy, but they're good.
That's
How are
good.
your three?
They're going great too. They actually have a babysitter today. And they have a friend visiting.
Look
That's
at
another.
you.
So I have 4 dogs in the house right now.
Nice.
So everybody,
Perfect.
we're here with another vid pod of Lizzy Albright in the attic window. And I just want to remind you that you don't need to watch. So once we've gotten going here, get it on your speakers or put it on your earbuds. Go about your day, whether you're quilting, sewing, baking, walking the dog, however you want to do it. We're coming to you from YouTube. This is a YouTube channel for Lizzy Albright. And so you can also find the Lizzy Albright playlist, and then you can just find all of these consecutively. So today we're going to get to meet Lizzie's granny.
Yay.
Tell me about your granny, Kat.
And grannies, the influencers everywhere, all over the planet. I had two wonderful grandmothers that both loved to quilt and knit and crochet. They tried to teach me the fine art of knitting, which I think I did for one summer and then promptly forgot it.
That's funny.
But yeah, really great influences in my life.
Well, my granny,
What about you?
my granny was quite the character, and I talk about her a lot in my concerts because of her
Yep.
influence and stuff like that. But she also was a quilter, but she didn't do log cabins and double wedding rings. She did those real scrappy, almost crazy quilts where just stick the fabric together and then they would be wool or corduroy or from men's suits, and they had to be tied. So I always tell people when I was a little boy,
Yeah, a couple of times.
the quilts were so heavy when I was a little boy that whenever Granny put me to bed, she put me to bed.
They call those comfort quilts now, the weighted blankets.
Well, I loved it. And so our grannies are huge influences. Lizzie has that kind of a relationship with her granny. We've said enough. Let's get into chapter 4. We're going to meet Granny.
Yeah.
Chapter 4. Hello? Granny asked as she picked up the phone receiver. Oh, hello, Oliver. Iola? Wonderful. Well, you're making good time. No, there's no big change in the weather here yet. It's just cold. Okay, we'll see you soon. Thanks for calling. Nellie had just checked on the ham and was at the sink peeling sweet potatoes when Granny hung up the receiver, walked through the hall, and went back into the kitchen. Nellie was humming along with the radio as Brenda Lee sang Rockin' Around the Christmas Tree. She didn't know all the words, but she jumped right in and sang along to Deck the Halls with Boughs of Holly, which was her favorite part. Nellie was always cheerful. They'll be here in about 90 minutes. We better hurry things up, Nellie. Would you please hand me the Jell-O molds? Nellie did as she was asked as Granny placed ice cubes into the hot green liquid, stirring it until they were melted, and then pouring it into the molds. McDougal trotted into the kitchen and sat down next to Granny. Well, there you are, McDougal. How was your nap? Did you chase any rabbits? Would you like a cookie? McDougal wagged his tail. Okay, just a minute. She stopped what she was doing and reached into his treat jar and pulled out a dog biscuit. McDougal sat up on his haunches. You're such a good dog. Granny gave McDougal the biscuit and patted him on the head. Want to go outside? McDougal gruffed. Granny opened the back door and McDougal trotted out, saw a ground squirrel, and bolted after it. He had never caught a squirrel. His short legs were not fast enough, but it didn't stop him from trying. Granny wiped her hands and smoothed her apron at the same time and went back to the Jell-O. Sarah did a great job. He looks so handsome, don't you think, Nellie? Sarah owned the Happy Pamper on Elm Street. She was the only groomer in Cordelia. Being a Scottie, McDougal didn't require a lot of grooming and maintenance, but Granny made regular appointments and always made sure he looked his best for the holidays. Indeed he does, replied Nellie. I love his new red plaid collar. Oh, well, you know me. I just couldn't resist it. Scottish Terriers had been a part of the McHale family for generations. In fact, Granny had never lived a day of her life without one. She felt McDougal was just about the smartest and best-natured dog she had ever owned. "Which china set should I put out this year?" asked Nellie. "I believe we used the Currier and Ives set for the last couple of years." "We have. It's still my favorite, so I say we use it again this year." Granny paused for a moment in thought. "As a matter of fact, I've just decided. From now on, it will be a Christmas Eve tradition. Currier and Ives, every Christmas Eve. How does that sound, Nellie?" Nellie nodded her approval. "Currier and Ives, every Christmas Eve," she said again, with a smile and a lilt in her voice, as though she were breaking some rule of etiquette about using the same table setting each year. This particular set of china had a distinctive rim of green holly and red berries alternating with sprigs of mistletoe. Each plate had a different winter scene in the center. It was far more spectacular than the other two sets of Christmas china Granny had inherited. Nellie entered the dining room and went to the cabinet to retrieve the china. "I bet I know where to place each of these," she giggled to herself. Each grandkid had a favorite plate. Alan always chose the one with the train. The scene showed a steam engine billowing thick black smoke, shining its headlamp into the night. It was stuck in a deep snowdrift, and several men with shovels were working to free it. He knew that the McHale fortune had begun as a result of his great-great-grandfather's position as vice president of the Missouri-Kansas-Texas Railroad. Since that was the only plate with a train on it, he claimed it as his. Doug liked the plate with the three-mast clipper navigating through an icy passage with full extended sails. Lizzie's favorite was a snowy scene with a large pine tree near the edge of a pond with red grouse snuggled together for warmth. Smaller birds twittered on a tree branch overhead. Lizzie was fond of birds and envious that they could fly, and she couldn't. As Nellie set the table, she stopped and looked around at the magnificent dining room. The room was abandoned most of the time. She and Granny ate their meals sitting around the kitchen table. It seemed pointless for just two people to dine in such an opulent space. These days, the formal dining room was only used when Granny had guests, and that wasn't very often at all. Nellie noted the rich mahogany paneling that lined the walls. The lower portions were completely covered by paneled sections. Higher up, each wooden section framed an open space that was covered in velvety wallpaper. The large-scale design featured swirling vines bursting with delicate ornamental flowers. Each one of these open areas contained an antique painting. The most prominent piece hung on the wall behind the head of the table. It was a large painting by Edwin Landseer, a portrait of 5 various breeds of dogs, including a Scottish Terrier, sitting regally in a craggy Scottish landscape. The McHales took pride in their Scottish heritage, and many indications of that were scattered throughout the family mansion. Bronze cherubs, raising triumphant torches, stood on the pedestals of the wall sconces. An enormous marble-top buffet stood on one side of the room, while a matching china cabinet occupied the corner. The antique Chippendale dining table dated back to 1770. It, too, was made of highly polished mahogany and could accommodate 18 diners. Both the table and the chairs exhibited the intricate and elegant designs typical of the Rococo style. The chair backs were carved with an elaborate intertwining pattern. Due to age and wear, the original fabrics on the seats had been reupholstered in red and gold brocade. The front legs of each chair gently tapered downward. They transitioned at the bottom and became the feet of a sharp-clawed animal, like a bear or a tiger, that was clenching an orb. Hanging from the lofty dining room ceiling was a crystal chandelier that had once adorned the grand ballroom at the Pennstroud Hotel in Philadelphia. Malcolm McHale had bought the chandelier in 1874 before they demolished the historic hotel. The same year, he started building the mansion. He felt he was saving a piece of history by installing it in his new residence. Although it was originally a gas chandelier, electricity soon became popular, and Malcolm had it wired for electric lights sometime before his death in 1902. There wasn't a person who walked into the McHale dining room that didn't comment on the magnificent chandelier. While Granny thought the chandelier was indeed a spectacular showpiece, she also felt it was a huge fuss to have someone come dust, polish, and clean it every couple of years. The chandelier wasn't the only thing in the house that was a huge fuss. There were plumbing issues and roofing issues, not to mention that the sheer size of the house made it an almost overwhelming challenge to clean. Nonetheless, the challenge was hers to bear. Malcolm McHale had been her grandfather. Lincoln McHale had been her father, and she had become the sole heir to the McHale estate. The mansion was the pride of Cordelia, and she was determined to do whatever was necessary to keep it that way. "What fruit shall I put in the jello?" Granny called out to Nellie, who was now almost finished setting the dining room table. "We have fresh grapes, canned pears, and mixed fruit," Nellie responded. "It's also good just plain," she said with a tad more emphasis. That was Nellie's way of saying she preferred jello without fruit in it. "No fruit it is," Granny confirmed. Nellie smiled. Nellie tended to the final details of the table setting and then went back to the kitchen where Granny was preparing to make her famous homemade cranberry sauce. While it was certainly popular to buy canned cranberry sauce these days, Granny was not giving in to any notion that canned cranberry sauce could possibly come close to measuring up to her culinary standards. "Esther, do you think it's time I should put the sweet potatoes in the oven?" Nellie was looking at the kitchen clock, and the question was intended to be more of a suggestion. "Oh, goodness, yes," said Granny. "Look at the time. There should be room on the back row below the ham. I expect it's almost done." Esther was, of course, Granny's given name. Her full name was Esther Ann McHale Winters. She had married Nathaniel Winters in 1924 at the age of 24. As a strong independent suffragette in the 1920s, she chose to break with tradition and hyphenate their last two names to show her independence as well as her solidarity with the other suffragettes. She also kept her financial independence as a way of protecting the McHale fortune and investments. While the railroad had allowed Malcolm McHale to soar to financial success, his son Lincoln had invested in oil in 1892. That was the year when the Norman No. 1 well struck it rich, kicking off the Kansas oil boom. Holes were being punched in the ground left and right, and gushers were springing up all over the region. Malcolm had provided investment funds and gave his full support to Lincoln, who eventually became one of the most successful oilmen in the country. The McHale Oil Company was legendary. The McHales became pillars of support for the region, and many people's lives depended on them. The estate on which the mansion sat had once required the service of dozens of workers. The McHale family was known for being generous and kind to their workers. There were farmhands, housemaids, a cook named Mr. Butler, and a butler named Mr. Cook. On any given day, the house bustled with family, friends, and workers. As a young girl, Esther befriended everyone that worked at the estate, and when some of the workers began having children of their own, she would often ask to help care for the children while the parents worked. Such was the case with Nellie. Nellie Butler was the daughter of Joseph Butler, the cook. Granny was only 10 years old when Nellie was born, and she immediately took to caring for Nellie. When Nellie turned 19, she married and moved to Oklahoma. 1 year later, Nellie's husband died in an accident, leaving Nellie with no source of income. Although by then, Esther and Nathan had married and moved to Kansas City, she pleaded with her parents to allow Nellie to move back to the estate and live with the family as long as she needed. They agreed. Nellie was allowed to live there and work alongside her father until he retired. After he left, Nellie took over as the main cook, and she had been there ever since. The McHale Mansion was Nellie's home, and Esther and Nellie were more like sisters than anything else. "Nellie, I do think we have managed it," said Granny. "I guess I better go turn the outside lights on. They'll be so surprised to see the decorations that Marcus put up." Nellie nodded. "I predict they will be astonished. And have you told them yet about your new Christmas tree?" "Which one?" Granny chuckled. "There's two they don't know about." "I guess that's true," said Nellie. "You are full of surprises this year." "I haven't told them anything. I can't wait to see their faces." Granny walked down the hall and turned into the foyer. She stopped at the towering grandfather clock. It had been a gift from her parents on her 21st birthday. Well, sir, you and I are coming up on another birthday, and guess what? We're both still ticking. Granny wound the clock, walked past the grand staircase, and switched on the outside lights.
Okay, so not only did we get to meet Granny, but we got to meet McDougal. Yay! The family dog.
McDougal,
love the dogs.
Absolutely.
We always love the dogs.
I'm always curious as to what kind of dogs people have. I have 2 mutts and a Great Dane.
Yes, and that Great Dane is going to be huge. She is so big. It's crazy.
But I have
I have 2 English Bulldogs.
And
so.
I have been around many Scottish Terriers. They are adorable dogs. They're fun. They have great personality. And it's exciting that we have a dog that is a Scottish Terrier. And it really relates to because Lizzy's family heritage is Scottish, the McHale family that we've learned about. And Mr. McHale having come from Scotland so many years ago. So that's part of the story. One of my favorite things in this chapter is just finally getting to get a sense of Granny's opulence. I mean, she comes from money. And so to get a picture of the mahogany walls in the dining room and the chairs and the Chippendales and all of that, that's pretty exciting for me.
Yeah, me too. This is truly where the likeness of Lizzie's life to mine kind of split away and went somewhere else because we wanted to make Granny a little bit more festive. So this is not a lifestyle that I was growing up with, but it sure is fun to write about.
I agree. And it was fun for me because I had probably a day or two of doing research on Chippendale furniture, the era, the time period, and trying to make a chandelier. I honestly went and researched not antique, but really old historic hotels in Philadelphia to see if I could find one that might have been restored way back then. But I had to basically make up a hotel. But we have this oversized chandelier in the dining room, which I really do love. But let's talk about the place setting.
Yes.
You're the one that found the place settings. Talk about that.
So I started researching since we just started talking about setting the table and all that. I was like, well, let's just see what kind of china settings would have been, popular back then or handed down and so I had remembered courier knives as a very popular thing and found some place settings that I liked online. And I sent you the pictures of them and said, what do you think of these? And you were like, oh, those are great. And then you went and did a crazy thing last Christmas.
What did I do?
You bought me one and mailed it to me.
I did. Push it closer to the camera
Crazy
so they
man.
can see it. Get close. So these plates that we've described in the chapter, this is them with their hollies and their mistletoe and the different scenes. Now, the crazy thing is there are 12 in the set, and I thought that would be fun to get to Kat. And then I thought, well, I'm just going to keep looking. So everybody, if you're listening to the vid pod, this is a come back and watch it moment, right? So Kat's got hers, but get ready for this. I have this one. Okay. And I love that.
Oh, he's got the ship. Yeah.
So there's another one. Oh, sorry, Kat. I hoarded all of them.
Oh, I guess you did.
I did. I hoarded all of them.
You totally did.
So this is them on the ice. They're the little ice sailboats type things. And I'm looking for the one with Lizzy and the Grouses. I'm missing 5. And you have one of the 5. Aren't those fun?
Yes.
Yeah. All right, here's the last one.
They are fun, and I love them. They're so colorful and pretty.
So this past Christmas, we had our Christmas dinner on these plates, and we actually did poor boys,
Oh
which
my
are
gosh.
we did poor boys in the fireplace, where you use the foil and you put your meat or your sausage and your potatoes and all of that, and wrap it all up like Girl Scouts and Boy Scouts.
Yes.
We did those in the fire, and we served them on these plates. That was our big Christmas this year.
Oh, that's wonderful. More ornamental than that. I'm going to find a proper place for it, for art.
Well, maybe between the two of us, we'll have a full set of it someday. So anyway, I think it's
Well, clearly you're well on your way.
I think it's great. I mean, I love the description of the dining room and all of that. This chapter, to me, I guess I love it because we just really get to understand Granny and her place. This is not a chapter that moves the story along. It just gives us more background and more foreshadowing of what's to come.
That's right.
And speaking of what's to come, the next time we visit with you, we will be doing chapter 5, where the Albrights arrive in Cordelia, and we get to see Lizzy and her brothers interacting with Granny and Nellie, and it's going to be fun. So stay tuned for that.
Yeah.